Silence. It enveloped the land like an ancient cloak woven from stardust and the echoes of centuries past. Before dawn, everything comes to a standstill. The sky above the endless steppes is still inky blue, but in the east, a barely perceptible, ghostly streak of light already shimmers. The air is still, as if holding its breath, anticipating the changes to come. This is the moment when time seems to slow, only to burst into motion again the next moment, sweeping entire nations and eras along with it. Who are they, these phantom riders, whose shadows have glided across these plains since time immemorial? What forces moved them, leaving only echoes in stone and gold? The horizon here is more than just a line dividing sky and earth. It is an endless promise, a path that never ends. In this vastness, where the wind whispers the secrets of millennia, civilizations have been born and died. But one has left a particularly vivid, albeit enigmatic, mark. Try to imagine these lands long before the wheels of history spun faster. Imagine a boundless sea of grass swaying in the wind, seemingly endless, like eternity itself. The sun rising over this expanse paints it in gold and crimson hues, awakening life after a long, cold night. It was here, in this great breath of the steppes, that the history of a people was born, whose name became synonymous with strength, freedom, and unbridled energy. They emerged from the depths of time, as if they were the very creations of this wild, primordial nature. No one can say for sure where they came from, what lands they saw before their paths led across these vast expanses. Their history is not written on stone tablets. It lives on in legends, in archaeological finds, in intricate designs engraved on gold. They were a people who did not build cities of stone, but whose strength lay in their mobility, in their inseparable connection with the horse and the vast expanses. It was a time when the world still held its secrets, when every dawn could bring both great gifts and severe trials. The earth breathed, and with it its inhabitants breathed, sensitively perceiving the slightest changes in the rhythm of nature. In this great eternal movement of the steppe winds, in this vastness where the horizon always beckoned forward, those we today call the Scythians were born. Who were they, really? Warriors, artists, traders, shamans, or all of these together, woven into a single, unique pattern? Their appearance on the historical stage was like a sudden but majestic dawn. They didn't ask to be on this earth. They simply came, conquering it with their spirit and their might. Their world was a world of horses, a world of constant movement, where home was wherever your herd stopped. It was a life full of dangers, but also full of freedom, where every day was a new challenge and every sunset the promise of a new day. Imagine this scene, the endless steppe, bathed in the first rays of sun. The air is still cool, but warmth is already approaching. Somewhere in the distance, the measured clatter of hooves can be heard, a sound that will become a guiding light for generations to come. It's not just a sound, it's the breath of the steppes, the pulse of life for a people inextricably linked to these vast expanses. They were part of this land, and the land was part of them. And so, in this dawn, in this awakening of nature, we begin our journey to understanding. We try to discern them through the veil of time, to understand their motives, their culture, their place in the great stream of history. They were a mystery that millennia have tried to unravel, but each new answer gave rise to even more questions. Who were they, these Scythians, whose breath can still be felt in the steppe wind? The nomad's journey isn't simply moving from point A to point B. It's the very essence of existence, a perpetual movement in which the horizon becomes the only home. Imagine a boundless sea of grass swaying in the wind like a living being. The sun, sometimes gently embracing, sometimes mercilessly blazing, creates a play of light and shadow across the vast expanses. And in this grandeur of nature, in this vastness, the Scythian is born and lives. Their world was not bound to stone walls and sedentary life. The steppes were their domain, and their trails were the paths worn by millions of hooves. A horse was more than just a means of transportation. It was an extension of the soul, a faithful companion on an eternal journey. Every beat of a hoof on the ground, every snort, every sigh of a weary animal, all this was the music of their lives, a symphony composed by nature itself. The breath of the steppes filled their lungs, the wind blew through their hair, and the stars overhead served as their only compass. Night fell slowly, painting the sky in crimson and gold hues. The firelight cast eerie shadows on the faces of the warriors gathered around. Their gazes were fixed on the distance, on the darkness where danger might lurk, or perhaps even new lands brimming with game and opportunity. The life of a nomad required constant vigilance, incredible endurance, and a profound understanding of the world around them. They understood the language of the wind, read footprints on the ground, and predicted the weather from the clouds. Every member of the tribe, from infant to old, played a role in this complex yet harmonious mechanism. Children learned to ride before they could walk, and women were no less skilled horsemen than men, tending to the home fires and raising future warriors. Their homes were yurts, light and sturdy, quickly assembled and disassembled. They followed the herds, the seasons, the eternal call of new pastures. It was a life on the move, a life where the concept of home expanded to encompass the entire visible horizon. Their possessions were mobile, their wealth in their livestock, their weapons, their freedom. But this didn't mean a lack of order or laws. Scythian society was strictly organized, with chieftains and kings whose power rested on the strength, wisdom, and respect of their fellow tribesmen. Their decisions determined the fate of entire tribes. Their courage inspired warriors, and their burials, majestic burial mounds, still preserve the secrets of their power. In this endless movement, under this bottomless sky, the unique character of the Scythians was formed. They were not simply wild nomads as they were sometimes portrayed. They were a people with deep roots, a rich culture, and a unique worldview. Their connection to the land was unbreakable, their respect for nature boundless. Every sunrise brought new challenges, every sunset new reflections. The path was not easy, but it was theirs. A path where every step filled them with meaning, and every trial made them stronger. Their story is not one of conquests and empires in the traditional sense, but a story of life, of freedom, of the eternal striving toward a horizon that always beckons forward. They moved like the wind, like water, like herds of wild animals, obeying their own inner laws and the rhythms of nature. Their life was inseparable from movement, from the road, from the sense of space. And in this movement, in this nomadic life, they found their place in the world, their purpose. Imagine a caravan moving slowly across the steppe. The sun is setting, painting the sky in fiery colors. All you can hear is the rhythmic clatter of hooves, the rustle of clothing, and quiet voices. These are the Scythians, following their path, carrying with them their culture, their traditions, the breath of the steppes. Their home is where their horses, their family, their tribe are. The horizon is their eternal landmark, their endless road. A time comes when bronze gives way to iron, and gold becomes not just decoration, but a symbol of power, a measure of valor. This is the golden age of Scythian weaponry, an era when military glory and mastery reach their apogee. In the hands of Scythian warriors, weapons become an extension of their will, an instrument forging the destiny of their tribe and people. Imagine the shine of polished bronze, the heaviness of arrowheads, the sharpness of swords forged in the furnace of Scythian forges. These are not simply murder weapons, they are works of art, crafted with incredible skill and a keen understanding of their purpose. Each blade, each axe, each spearhead embodied power, precision, and beauty. The Scythians were unrivaled archers. Their complex composite bows curved with incredible force, releasing arrows capable of piercing the toughest armor. This was a weapon that required not only physical strength, but also astonishing dexterity and lightning-fast reactions. Arrows tipped with special tips dealt death from a distance, allowing the Scythians to fight while remaining out of enemy reach. These arrows, with their characteristic three-lobed or leaf-shaped tips, were so numerous that they could literally bury the enemy. But their strength wasn't limited to the bow. Heavy weaponry also played a role. Powerful swords like the echina case, a short broadsword, were ideal for close combat and swift attacks from horseback. It was a symbol of power and military honor, a weapon passed down from generation to generation. Heavy axes and maces, capable of piercing armor, were also in the arsenal of Scythian warriors, prepared for any eventuality. Gold, this precious metal, played a special role. It adorned weapons, making them not only deadly, but also majestic. Gold mounts on sword hilts, gold elements on quivers, gold decorations on helmets, all spoke of the owner's status, their wealth, and, most importantly, their military prowess. Gold was not just a symbol of wealth, but also evidence of victories and trophies won in battle. Military valor was the cornerstone of Scythian society. A young warrior had to prove his bravery by performing a heroic deed, capturing an enemy's head, or killing an enemy in battle. Only then could he be considered a full member of society, worthy of bearing arms and claiming respect. This system of values molded generation after generation of fearless warriors, ready to fight for their land, their honor, and their tribe. Weapons were inextricably linked with the horse. Rider and steed were one. Swift charges, feints, surprise attacks, all of this was possible thanks to the Scythian skill as horsemen and their ability to wield weapons at full gallop. Imagine a whirlwind sweeping across the steppe, the gleam of steel, the cries of warriors, the clatter of hooves. This was an army feared and respected. However, even in this golden age, when Scythian weaponry inspired awe, there were also more peaceful aspects. Trade with neighboring peoples, especially the Greeks, brought new materials and technologies to the Scythian world. Greek craftsmen, in turn, were impressed by Scythian art and warrior spirit, drawing inspiration for their own creations. At this time, the Scythians were not just nomads, but a formidable force, capable of challenging even mighty empires. Their military organization, their discipline, their devotion to their leaders, all this made them a dangerous adversary. Weapons in their hands were not just tools, but an extension of their will, their spirit, their desire for freedom. As the sun sank below the horizon, leaving behind only the glimmer of the fading day, warriors cleaned and prepared their weapons for new trials. Every blade, every bow, every shield held stories of battle, tales of courage and loss. And in this silence, filled only by the whisper of the steppe wind, one could sense the power accumulated over centuries, a strength that would again be fully revealed. It was a time when the art of war and the art of life were inseparable, when weapons were not only a means of defense, but also the embodiment of the very essence of Scythian existence. Thus, in the golden gleam of their swords and the sharpness of their arrows, the Scythians wrote their history, leaving an indelible mark on the peoples they encountered. Their military valor and mastery of arms became legends passed down from generation to generation, a reminder of their fortitude and unwavering will to win. The silence that precedes change always seems particularly profound. Time, as if holding its breath, prepares to pick up speed again. And in this pause, new forms, new meanings are born. Scythian art is precisely such a sigh, frozen in metal and stone, the breath of the steppes captured in intricate patterns. It was not simply decoration, it was the very essence of their world, a mirror of their soul. Amidst the boundless expanses, where the horizon merged with the sky and the wind rewrote the sand dunes, a unique aesthetic was born. It was an animalistic style, a language understood by all who lived in harmony with nature. It brought to life mighty deer, their branching antlers like treetops, swift cats poised to pounce, and birds of prey soaring above the earth. These images weren't simply copies of wild nature. They were its embodiment, its spirit, distilled through the passion and strength of nomads. Imagine a gold plaque found in one of the royal burial mounds. It depicts a tangled web of intertwined animals. Every curve, every line carries energy, tension, a struggle for life. This is not a static image. It is a frozen moment of perpetual motion. Lions wrestling with griffins, deer with bowed heads, birds with predatory beaks. All these are symbols of strength, power, and a connection to the other world. Craftsmen worked with metal, gold, bronze, silver. They knew how to impart flexibility and ductility to it, making it come alive under their hands. Gold, so bright, so sunny, was ideal for depicting strength and majesty. It was used not only for jewelry, but also for horse harness parts, weapons, and clothing. Each object was a work of art, bearing the imprint of the Scythian worldview. Stone also served as a canvas for their creativity. Steles, decorated with carvings and images of people and animals, stood in the steppe expanses like silent guardians, preserving the memory of the past. These were more than just monuments. They were messages to descendants, signs of their presence, testaments to their lives and faith. The nomadic spirit was evident in every detail. a dislike of empty space, a desire for fullness and dynamism. All of this was reflected in their art. The animalistic style was full of movement, even when captured in stone or metal. Every figure seemed ready to leap, every line breathing life. This art was not only aesthetically pleasing, but also functional. Jewelry served as amulets, status symbols, and signs of belonging to a particular clan or tribe. It told stories about the gods, heroes, and myths that were an integral part of Scythian culture. The animal style conveyed a profound connection with the natural world, with its primal power. The Scythians saw themselves as part of this world, its children, its warriors. Their art was a way to express this connection, this harmony, this sometimes cruel but always beautiful reality. When the wind blew across the steppe, rustling the grass, it seemed to carry echoes of ancient legends captured in gold and stone. This was an art born of movement, of constant exploration, of a life where every day was a challenge and every dawn a new beginning. And in this art, so vibrant and expressive, we see not just craftsmanship, but a profound understanding of the world, reflected in the eternal dance of animal forms. Time flows, changing landscapes and destinies, but art born from the spirit of nomads lives on, reminding us of the strength, beauty, and boundless energy of the ancient steppes. It lies frozen in metal and stone, waiting to be rediscovered to tell its stories. A new chapter of the ancient world opens before us, where faith was intertwined with everyday life, and heaven and earth were not simply elements, but living beings full of mystery and power. The Scythians, like many peoples, drew their understanding of the universe from observations of nature. The endless expanse of the steppe, where the horizon merged with the sky, was a source of inspiration and a sacred space for them. The sky, boundless and incomprehensible, personified a higher power, the source of life and light. The earth, fertile and giving, was the mother, the nurse, the one who receives and preserves. Their myths, like the wind, swept across the vast expanses, telling of the birth of the world, the struggle between good and evil, and of heroes and gods. These stories were passed down orally, woven into the fabric of their lives and shaping their world view. Scythian gods did not always have clearly anthropomorphic features, as did those of the Greeks. They were often represented as forces of nature, animals, or abstract entities. Fire, the sun, thunderstorms, wind, the earth itself, all could be embodiments of the divine. Imagine an evening in a Scythian camp. Fires cast dancing shadows on the yurts. The air is filled with the scent of smoke and roasting meat. In the center of the circle, under a vast star-studded sky, an elder or shaman begins his story. His voice, like the rustle of steppe grass, transports listeners to a world where the earth breathes and the heavens speak. He tells of a celestial deity whose power grants fertility and light, and of an earth goddess whose wisdom and care preserve life. Perhaps he tells of a great ancestor whose soul dwells in every blade of grass, in every stone. Shamans occupied a special place in Scythian society. They were intermediaries between the human and the spirit worlds. Their rituals, their dances, their songs, all were aimed at establishing a connection with the divine, healing, and predicting the future. Shamans could enter trances, traveling to other worlds where they gained the knowledge and power necessary to protect their people. Their clothing, often adorned with feathers, and their tambourine, which produced enchanting sounds, all this created an atmosphere of mystical performance, enveloping those present in a sense of awe and anticipation. Imagine a shaman clad in animal skins, his hair braided and adorned with bone amulets. He stands by a sacred fire, his eyes closed, his body trembling to the rhythm of a drum. He hears the voices of his ancestors, sees signs hidden from ordinary people. His ecstatic movements, his invocations to the spirits, all this was part of a complex ritual designed to secure the favor of the gods and spirits. The wind seemed to still, listening to him. Ancestor worship also played a significant role. The souls of the dead were considered guardians of the family line, protectors from harm. Kurgans, those majestic mounds we see today, were not just graves, but also sanctuaries, places where the living could communicate with those who had passed on. Within these burials, among gold and weapons, rested those who had once ruled, fought, and lived. And their spirits, the Scythians believed, continued to influence the world of the living. Their beliefs had no place for rigid dogma. Rather, they were a living, breathing system, closely connected to the rhythms of nature and the cycles of life. The sun, rising each morning, brought hope. The moon, changing its phases, reminded them of impermanence and eternal movement. The stars, twinkling in the night, were guiding lights, pointing the paths of the spirits. The sky, like a great domed abode, was the receptacle of higher powers. Its immensity inspired awe. The earth, which provided harvests and nourished herds, was an object of reverence and gratitude. This dualism, this unity of heaven and earth, permeated their entire culture, from their everyday life to their most cherished beliefs. The Scythian imagination was rich with images of power and wild beauty. Their gods could be as formidable as a storm, or as generous as the summer sun. Their myths often included scenes of struggle, hunting, and journeys to other worlds. This was a reflection of their own lives, a life full of dangers, but also full of grandeur. There were also more specific deities associated with specific aspects of life. For example, a god of war, whose power was invoked before battle, or a goddess of fertility, whose blessing was sought for their herds and lands. These deities might have their own temples or sacred groves where special rituals were performed. In their cosmogony, in their understanding of the world, there was no division between the sacred and the profane. Everything was imbued with spiritual meaning. Every sunrise, every sunset, every breath of wind, everything carried echoes of the divine. They lived in harmony with these rhythms, feeling themselves part of the great, unceasing cycle of life. Sometimes, in moments of exceptional silence, when the wind died down and the stars shone especially brightly, one could feel these ancient beliefs come alive. It was as if the spirits of our ancestors, the gods of the steppes themselves, were whispering their stories through the centuries. It was a time when reality and myth merged, creating the unique atmosphere of the ancient world. Understanding these beliefs helps us see the Scythians not simply as warriors or nomads, but as a people deeply connected to nature, its mysteries, and its power. Their faith was a reflection of their lives, their aspirations, their place in a vast, incomprehensible cosmos. And in this reflection, we can catch an echo of those ancient times when heaven and earth spoke the same language, and people listened with awe and reverence. A change of era approached, like a breath of wind across the endless steppe. Far to the west, beyond the Greek colonies, a new history, full of grandeur and despair, was beginning. The world the Scythians knew, a world where the horizon was their home and horses an extension of their legs, was about to be tested. It was a time when the audacity of nomads clashed with the might of one of the greatest empires of antiquity. Persia, whose dominion stretched from India to Asia Minor, turned its gaze north to lands where the steppe seemed endless. King Darius, a mighty ruler renowned for his wisdom and cruelty, assembled a vast army. His ships glided across the Black Sea, carrying thousands of armored warriors with bows whose arrows could outshine the sun. He dreamed of annexing new lands to his empire, subjugating tribes rumored to live freely, refusing to recognize the authority of kings. Darius believed in his mission, in his right to rule over all peoples. His army was like an advancing wave, sweeping away everything in its path. But the Scythians were not a people easily subdued. They were children of the steppe, born in the saddle, their lives a life of constant movement, their strength in unity and in their knowledge of their native land. They knew every ravine, every river, every patch of grass. When news of the Persians' approach reached them, a whisper echoed across the steppe, followed by a menacing cry. The Scythian kings gathered for council, their faces stern, their eyes ablaze with determination. They understood that a battle unlike any before awaited them. The encounter with the Persians tested the entire Scythian way of life. Darius, accustomed to fighting on the plains where his infantry could form an impenetrable wall, faced an enemy who did not hold a single line. The Scythians employed tactics that were new and devastating to the Persians. They did not engage in open battle where numbers were decisive. Instead, they retreated like shadows, leaving the Persians alone in the vast expanses. The Scythian cavalry swept past the Persian camps like the wind, laying waste to them, stealing livestock, and giving the enemy no rest. They were everywhere and nowhere at once. Their arrows, skillfully fired from curved bows, found their marks, striking Persian warriors before they could even raise their shields. Each strike was swift, precise, and deadly. The Persian army, accustomed to orderly ranks and frontal assaults, found itself trapped. They pressed forward, but the enemy slipped away, leaving behind only a trail of dust and a sense of impotence. Darius was furious. His pride was hurt. He sent messengers demanding the Scythians accept battle, fight like men. But the Scythians only laughed at his calls. They knew their strength lay not in fighting to the death, but in surviving, in preserving their people and their freedom. They toyed with the Persians like a cat with a mouse, wearing them down, draining their resources, and dashing their hopes. There were moments when the Persians attempted to set an ambush, when they tried to corner the Scythians. But the steppe was the nomads' ally. They knew where to find water, where to find shelter from the scorching sun, where to hide from the enemy. The Persian army, unsuited to such conditions, suffered from thirst, hunger, and constant tension. Their pace slowed, their spirit weakened. One of the Scythian kings, Idanthyrsus, sent Darius an unusual gift: a bird, a mouse, a frog, and 5 arrows. The envoy explained, "If you can't fly like birds, hop across swamps like frogs, and run like mice, then you won't be able to use our arrows." This bold response was a challenge, a mockery of the Persian king's self-confidence. It demonstrated that the Scythians had no intention of submitting, that they were prepared to defend their land to the last. Every day of this war was filled with anxiety and anticipation. The Persian warriors gazed at the endless horizon with growing fear. They saw only the steppe, and this steppe seemed to them a living being, hostile and unpredictable. The sound of the wind in the tall grass now sounded like a whisper of menace, and the distant clatter of hooves a harbinger of imminent doom. Darius, realizing the hopelessness of his situation, realized he could not conquer this people. His great army, faced with an elusive enemy and harsh nature, was broken. He decided to retreat, leaving behind his ambitions and many fallen soldiers. This encounter left a deep mark on history. The Scythians proved that even the most powerful empire can be defeated when confronted by a people united in their desire for freedom and aware of their land. Audacity versus empire. In this confrontation, freedom triumphed. But this victory came at a huge cost, and new threats loomed on the horizon, ready to change the course of history. A change of era approaches, like a breath of wind across the steppe. Power, royal burial mounds, the greatness of rulers buried forever. The victory over Darius, though hard won, bore the seed of coming change. The great horde, whose horses had recently trampled the Persian plains, now felt the weight of its own greatness. Scythian strength, revealed in the fury of battle, demanded a new embodiment. And this embodiment was visible in the hills that towered over the endless expanses, the royal burial mounds. They were not just graves, but monuments of an era, testaments to a power that extended far beyond the visible horizon. These earthen mounds, like giant guardians, guarded the secrets of bygone centuries. Beneath their protection lay rulers whose names may have faded from the memory of generations, but whose influence continued to be felt. Here, in the depths of the earth, their paths took on eternity. Once they led their tribes, making decisions that determined the fates of thousands. Now their peace was disturbed only by the whisper of the wind and the tread of archaeologists carefully descending into the dark maws of the tombs. Inside the mounds, like time capsules, traces of former splendor were preserved. Gold, plundered in countless campaigns, glimmered dimly in the lantern light. Weapons, once formidable, now lay silent, but their majesty undiminished. Horses, the warriors' faithful companions in life, accompanied them into the afterlife, adorned with elaborate blankets and bridles. And alongside them were people, warriors, servants, wives, sacrificed to serve their masters in the realm of the dead. These burials were grandiose. They reflected the Scythian concept of life after death, the continuation of power and greatness. The king, even after departing from the world of the living, remained king. His burial was meant to demonstrate this, to seal his status for eternity. Therefore, the burial mounds contained not only personal belongings, but also entire burial complexes, testifying to wealth and power.
Imagine the moment when these mounds were first erected. The earth trembled beneath the feet of thousands of people carrying earth.
It was an act of collective remembrance, a way to immortalize the leader's achievements. Every handful of earth thrown onto the deceased's bed was a tribute, a promise to remember. And now, centuries later, these mounds stand, a reminder that power, like life, has its cycles. Within the mounds, in a silence broken only by the breathing of the explorers, history came alive. Every object, every bone, told its own story. The Scythian kings, whose lives were full of movement, battles, and conquests, found peace here. Their kingdoms, spread across vast territories, were now represented by these silent hills. The grandeur of their rulers, buried forever, became part of the landscape, part of a history that continues to speak to us. Sometimes, deep within these tombs, archaeologists found not only gold and weapons, but also remarkably preserved textiles, wooden objects, and even food remains. These were tiny details that helped to reconstruct a picture of the daily life that surrounded these powerful people. They lived, loved, fought, and ruled. And when their time came, they were buried with such grandeur that it underscored their exceptionalism. These burial mounds were a kind of capital of the dead, places where power continued even after the ruler's physical departure. They served as a reminder to the living of who ruled them and the legacy they left behind. This was not simply a farewell, but a continuation of existence in another dimension, protected by earth and sky. The steppe wind, the Scythians' eternal companion, blew across these hills, as if trying to tell their stories to those willing to listen. It carried the sense of grass, dust, and distant rains, creating an atmosphere of antiquity and grandeur. These mounds are silent witnesses to a bygone era, places where reality and myth, history and legend intertwine. They preserve the memory of those who once ruled these lands, those whose greatness can still be felt in the silence of the steppe. It is in places like these, where time seems to slow, that we can sense the breath of the past. The greatness of rulers buried forever becomes tangible. This is not just history written in books, but history carved into the earth, captured in gold and stone. The royal burial mounds are monuments that remind us of the cyclical nature of power, the transience of earthly things, and the eternity of memory. And each new artifact discovered, each deciphered inscription, only deepens our understanding of these remarkable people and their world. In this silence, amidst the boundless expanses where the horizon merges with the sky, the royal burial mounds stand as eternal reminders of those who once ruled. Their grandeur, buried forever, lives on in the memory of the earth. The northern Black Sea region, where the steppe meets the sea, became the arena for astonishing relationships. Here, under the generous southern sun, Greek colonies sprawled, shining points of civilization amidst the vast expanses. And beyond them, deep inland, lay the domain of the Scythians, the nomadic rulers of the steppes. Two worlds so different, yet connected by invisible threads, lived side by side, intertwining stories of trade, friendship, and at times violent clashes. The Greeks, with their love of order, cities built according to a precise plan, art and philosophy, viewed the Scythians with a mixture of curiosity and wariness. For them, the Scythians embodied wild, unbridled strength, a people whose lives were governed only by the rhythm of nature and the movement of their herds. They saw them as warriors whose arrows flew faster than the wind, and craftsmen whose gold jewelry stunned the imagination. The Scythians, in turn, viewed the Greeks as guardians of untold riches, as artisans capable of creating wondrous things. Their cities, with their white walls and bustling harbors, seemed wondrous but alien to the Scythians. They came to the southern shores, driven by a thirst for trade, ready to offer their furs, gold, slaves, and grain in exchange for wine, silver, fabrics, and exquisite goods. Trade flourished. Caravans traveled along the Silk Road, or rather its northern branches. Goods traveled by land and sea in small but sturdy ships. Greek merchants sailed down the rivers flowing into the Black Sea and encountered Scythian traders at fords and crossings. In exchange for barrels of the aromatic wine so prized by the Scythians, they received precious fox and marten pelts obtained in distant forests, or chunks of raw gold which the Scythians mined from river sands. Greek amphorae were particularly prized. Their smooth, streamlined forms, decorated with paintings, seemed true works of art to the Scythians. They held wine, and later served to store water or grain. Greek craftsmen crafted weapons for the Scythians, decorated with their famous animal motifs. Swords, arrowheads, horse harness parts, all of these were given new life in the hands of skilled artisans. It wasn't just goods that crossed borders. Ideas, beliefs, and ways of life, all of these also mingled. Greek gods found their worshippers among the Scythians, and Scythian motifs permeated Greek art. Entire settlements existed where Greeks and Scythians lived side by side, creating unique hybrid cultures. For example, in Olbia, a Greek colony on the banks of the Bug estuary, archaeologists have found abundant evidence of such close interaction. Sometimes this closeness blossomed into genuine friendship. Greek cities besieged by enemies often received aid from Scythian leaders. In turn, the Scythians, faced with internal problems or threats from other peoples, could count on the support of their southern neighbors. Such alliances, sealed with gifts and oaths, were not uncommon. However, as often happens, peaceful coexistence was not eternal. Steppe winds could suddenly change direction, bringing with them storm clouds. The Scythians, a mobile and warlike people, could be provoked by insults, broken treaties, or simply a desire for loot. At such moments, their swift cavalry units would descend upon border settlements, sowing fear and destruction. The Greeks, accustomed to organized defense, couldn't always withstand sudden raids. But they knew how to defend themselves. Their cities were fortified, and at sea they could rely on their fleets. Sometimes, when the threat became too great, the Greek cities united to fight back. The most striking example of such clashes and later complex interactions was the confrontation between the Scythians and the Persian Empire. When Darius I, the King of Kings, decided to subjugate the Scythian tribes, he encountered a people who did not recognize authority and did not fear death. The Scythians, led by their kings, eschewed open battle, preferring a scorched earth tactic and attritional raids. They drove away herds, destroyed wells, and retreated deep into the steppes, luring the enemy. The Persian army, vast and powerful, proved powerless against these tactics. It starved, suffered from thirst, and suffered from constant attacks. This was a crushing defeat for the empire, demonstrating the strength and independence of the Scythian spirit.
The Greeks, observing this conflict, learned a valuable lesson. But even during periods of tension, when the sword hung by a thread, trade and cultural exchange did not cease completely. Numerous Greek artifacts have been found in Scythian burial mounds, and traces of Scythian influence have been found in Greek cities. This suggests that, despite all the differences and conflicts, both peoples found common ground, recognizing each other's value. This boundary between the steppe and the sea, between nomads and settled populations, was more than just a line on a map. It was a living, pulsating organism where life, death, wealth and poverty, friendship and enmity intertwined in a complex yet captivating pattern. And every new artifact discovered by archaeologists, every stone containing ancient inscriptions, adds new details to this grandiose canvas, revealing to us the secrets of the relationship between the Greeks and the Scythians, peoples who left an indelible mark on history. A change of era approaches, like a breath of wind across the endless steppe. The air is filled with a premonition of change. Decline, like a fog, slowly envelops the once mighty Scythian lands. The silence that precedes a storm becomes increasingly palpable. Internal strife, like cracks in the sturdy shield of Scythian power, appears. Kindred tribes, once united in their strength, begin to view each other with suspicion. The cold flame of ambition flares in the hearts of leaders, eclipsing ancient bonds of brotherhood. Trade routes that once rang with the clink of coins and the laughter of merchants are now sometimes darkened by the shadow of bandits. The Greeks, still trading on the northern shores, are beginning to notice these changes. Their ships laden with wine and pottery still arrive, but they no longer meet with the same unity. The Scythians, always ready to defend their lands, are now forced to contend not only with external enemies, but also with internal disunity. Internal strife weakens them, making them vulnerable. External threats, like hungry predators, sniff out weakness. From the northern steppes, where cold and winds have always wafted, new rumors are coming. A people, driven by an insatiable thirst for conquest, is gaining strength. Their onslaught is becoming ever more palpable. They arrive with iron in their hands and fire in their eyes, bringing with them a new, harsh era. Scythian warriors, accustomed to battles with Persians and Greeks, now face an enemy whose tactics and strength are different. This new enemy does not seek glory in duels. It advances like an inexorable wave, sweeping away everything in its path. The ancient burial mounds that guard the peace of kings begin to sense the vibrations of the approaching storm. Their golden jewelry, their weapons, everything that testified to their former greatness now seems fragile in the face of the approaching threat. Shamans, calling upon the sky and the earth, sense a shift in the flow of energy. Their predictions become increasingly alarming, painting pictures of loss and oblivion. The animalistic style, which embodied the spirit of the wild and the strength of the Scythian people, seems to be giving way to cruder yet more effective forms. Art, which once adorned their lives and glorified their gods, is now fading into the background. Military valor, though still revered, cannot alone combat disunity. The great kings, buried in their golden tombs, seem to look down from the depths of time upon their descendants who failed to maintain unity. This is the beginning of the end, But not a sudden end, but a slow one, like the sunset that paints the sky crimson before nightfall. The steppe, always home and battlefield, is now becoming the site of the drama of a passing era. The sounds of hooves that once rushed across the endless expanses now ring out ever more rarely, drowned out by the rustle of change. With each passing day, with each wind that brought news from the east, the Scythian tribes felt the fragility of their power. Internal strife, like poison ivy, entangled them, weakening and debilitating them. The pride and independence that had always been their hallmarks now turned into stubbornness, preventing them from uniting in the face of a common disaster. Some leaders, consumed by a lust for power, saw the weakening of the central government as an opportunity for their own aggrandizement, not realizing that this was the path to the destruction of the entire people. Others, faithful to old customs, could not accept the new realities, continuing to live in the past as the world around them rapidly changed. It was during this period, when unity was as essential as air, that Scythian society began to crumble. Enemies, like seasoned hunters, sensed this weakness. They watched as internal conflicts devoured the energy that could have been devoted to defense against external threats. Rumors of new peoples, their martial prowess and unstoppable strength, reached Scythian settlements, causing anxiety and uncertainty. It was a time when the walls erected by centuries of glory and valor began to slowly crumble under the onslaught of internal contradictions and external challenges. The wind blew ever colder across the steppe, heralding the dawn of a new, uncharted era. The great Scythian kingdom, once formidable and powerful, found itself at a crossroads. Its history, filled with battles, art, and a unique culture, was drawing to a close. But even as sunset approached, the light of the Scythian spirit had not yet completely faded. It shimmered in the eyes of warriors preparing for the final battle, in the songs of storytellers lamenting lost greatness, and in the golden artifacts that archaeologists would find millennia later to tell the world of a great people whose destiny was so closely linked to the free breath of the steppes. This period of decline and discord, this apparent weakness, was merely a lull before the inevitable, monumental clash that would change the course of history. The sun sank toward the horizon, painting the endless steppes in shades of crimson and gold. The wind, once gentle, now whispered disturbing news, carrying with it the dust of distant roads and the scent of coming change. It was a time when the shadows of the past had not yet dissipated, but new silhouettes, unfamiliar and menacing, were already looming on the horizon. The Scythian kingdom, once stretching its domain from sea to sea, felt the ground beneath its feet becoming unstable. Gone were the days of unquestioned dominance, when the very air seemed imbued with the Scythian spirit. Now in their place came new sounds, new voices, demanding and inexorable. The twilight of an era is always tinged with a special piercing beauty. It is a time when the grandeur of the past still shimmers brightly, but the cold breath of the future is already felt. The Scythians, whose glory thundered across the known world, found themselves on the threshold of a great trial. Their cities, once filled with life and the clash of arms, now seemed quieter, more wary. The old roads, along which countless herds and armies had moved, now led to the unknown. The great burial mounds, silent guardians of former might, seemed to listen to the growing rumble, the distant clatter of hooves. And the sound of tramping was getting closer. From the east, from unknown lands where the sky seemed closer and the steppe even wider, came the Sarmatians. They were a people born as if of the steppe itself, with an iron will and a swift onslaught. Their armor gleamed in the rays of the setting sun, their bows were drawn, and the fire of conquerors burned in their eyes. They knew no Scythian lore, did not bow to their gods. For them, only the present moment existed, only the force that propelled them forward. The Sarmatians were different. Their cavalry, lighter and more maneuverable, seemed to blend with the wind. Their warriors, clad in scale armor, were deadly in close combat, and their long spears, the sarissas, could pierce any armor. They did not come in peace, not offering an alliance. They came to take what was theirs, to carve a new path through history. Their onslaught was like an unstoppable torrent, sweeping away everything in its path. The Scythians, accustomed to victories and to the fear of their name, were unprepared for such a force. Internal strife, which had weakened their unity, played into the hands of their new enemies. Experienced commanders, their hair marked by hundreds of battles, felt their strength draining. Young warriors, full of courage, were unable to match the Sarmatian onslaught with their former might. The steppes, which had been their home and fortress for centuries, now seemed defenseless against this new, formidable invasion. The decline of the Scythian era was not a quiet fading, but a turbulent, dramatic clash. It was a time when ancient traditions collided with a new reality, when the gold of the Scythian burial mounds was threatened, and the clash of swords was replaced by the clang of Sarmatian spears. The wind that once sang of the glory of the Scythian kings now brought news of defeat, of lost lands, of the ancient world crumbling. Night was approaching, long and cold. But even in the darkest times, the light of the past never fades completely. It remains in legends, in songs, in golden jewelry that, like sparks, pierce through the depths of centuries. The history of the Scythians, filled with audacity, art, and indomitable spirit, could not simply vanish. It transformed, giving way to new times, new peoples, but leaving an indelible mark on the very soul of the steppes. The Sarmatians continued their advance. They moved, leaving behind a changing landscape, a shifting power structure. Their victories were not sudden. They were the result of persistent, relentless onslaught. Gradually, step by step, they occupied territories previously dominated by the Scythians. This was not simply a military invasion. It was a paradigm shift, a change in the very essence of power in this vast steppe expanse. The pain of loss was evident in the eyes of the Scythian leaders. They saw their world, created by their ancestors, crumbling into pieces. But even in this despair, in this premonition of the end, pride remained. The pride of a people who did not submit without a fight, who left a lasting mark on history. They fought to the last, trying to preserve what was dear to them. But time is inexorable, and the course of history cannot be reversed. The Sarmatian wave swept across the steppes like a tide. It brought with it a new culture, new customs, new languages. The Scythians, caught in this onslaught, began to dissolve, assimilate, giving way to new masters. It was a natural progression of events, a logical change of eras that neither courage nor art nor ancient traditions could prevent. The decline of the Scythian Empire was inevitable. It was foretold by internal strife and hastened by the unstoppable power of the Sarmatians. But even in this decline, in this change of power, there is beauty and grandeur. It is the beauty of the end of one chapter and the beginning of another, yet unwritten. The wind continues to carry its stories, and now they are filled with new motifs, new voices. Sarmatian dominance was established gradually but firmly. Their influence spread like the shadow of a mighty tree. They brought with them their way of life, their military tactics, their worldview. The lands that had once belonged to the Scythians now became Sarmatian lands. And this wasn't just a change of names on a map. It was a profound transformation of an entire way of life. The farewell to the Scythians was quiet, almost imperceptible to the uninitiated. It took place not in the roar of battle, but in the slow decline of their culture, the dissolution of their language, and the emergence of a new way of speaking and living among their descendants. The great burial mounds erected in their honor remain standing as silent monuments to their former glory, holding within them secrets and memories. The evening air was filled with the scent of smoke from campfires, perhaps the last meal of Scythian warriors being cooked, or the first fires lit by the new inhabitants of these lands. There was a sense of order in this change, albeit a sad one. Time passed, and each era had to give way to the next. The Sarmatians, who came from the east, were not simply conquerors. They were part of a larger migration flow that redrew the map of the ancient world. Their arrival was as inevitable as the changing seasons. They brought with them their energy, their strength, their will to live, which, like the steppe wind, was indomitable and all-pervasive. As the sun's last rays touched the hilltops, painting them with a final golden glow, one could sense the steppe's atmosphere changing. It became more tense, more restless. It was the breath of an era that was passing, and the breath of an era that was just beginning. A change of rulers, a change of destinies, a change of everything that made up the life of these boundless expanses. Thus, the Sarmatian onslaught became more than just a military conflict, but a turning point that marked the end of one great era and the beginning of another. It was a story of how even the most powerful kingdoms can give way to new forces, how history always moves forward, bringing with it change and transformation. And in this movement, in this changing of times, there is its own enduring wisdom, its own eternal echo. And so, as the Sarmatian wind swept across the steppes, leaving behind only the quiet rustle of grass and the echoes of past battles, a new chapter begins. This is a chapter about memory, about how threads of the past pierce through the depths of centuries, connecting us to those who lived here before us. The Scythians, once a mighty people, masters of these boundless expanses, are now only shadows, ghosts, whose traces remain in the earth. Their kingdoms have long since turned to dust, their cities vanished under the onslaught of time. But something remains, the burial mounds. These gigantic mounds, raised by the hands of thousands of people, hold their secrets, their beliefs, their lives. They are silent witnesses, guarding their secrets for centuries. Each burial mound is an entire universe encased in the earth, waiting to be revealed. Archaeology is the key to these forgotten worlds. It is the art of bringing back to life what seemed lost forever. When archaeologists carefully peel back layers of earth, they are uncovering forgotten stories. They work with reverence, understanding that every artifact, every find, is a fragment of the past that can tell us about the life, customs, and beliefs of the Scythian people. Imagine an excavation. The sun is blazing, the air is thick with dust. Shovels carefully dig into the earth, each stroke like a touch of the past. And then, amid the clay and stones, something glittering appears. Gold. The Scythians loved gold. It was a symbol of their power, their wealth, their connection to the gods. When archaeologists unearth gold jewelry, weapons, and utensils, they see more than just shiny objects. They see the skill of ancient artisans. They see traces of luxury. They see symbols that held enormous significance for Scythian society. These finds reveal much. Take, for example, the famous animal style. Depictions of animals, deer, lions, griffins, are executed with incredible precision and expression. These animals were more than just decorations. They carry deep symbolic meaning, personifying strength, speed, and the spirit of nature, which was so important to nomads. When we see these gold plaques and pendants, we can imagine the clothing of Scythian warriors, their richly decorated horses, and their military standards. But it's not only gold that speaks to us. Clay shards, weapon fragments, and animal bones are all pieces of the mosaic. Bones tell us about what the Scythians ate, how they hunted, and which animals were important to them. Weapons speak of their military prowess, how they fought, and how they defended their lands. Even simple clay pottery can tell us about everyday life, how they prepared food, and how they lived in their yurts. Finds related to burials are especially important. The Scythians believed in an afterlife. They buried their leaders and noble warriors along with their possessions, their horses, and even their servants. These royal burial mounds, as they are called, are veritable treasure troves. Entire chariots, richly decorated with gold, weapons, jewelry, and even frozen bodies preserved by the permafrost, have been found there. Imagine archaeologists working in such conditions. The cold penetrates to the bone, but the work continues. And suddenly, beneath layers of ice and earth, they see something astonishing. A Scythian warrior, dressed in his clothes, with a weapon at his belt. His skin, his hair, even the tattoos on his body, everything is preserved. It's like seeing a person who has just fallen asleep, but in reality, he's been asleep for millennia. It's a moment when the past comes alive before your eyes, when the connection between time and time becomes tangible. These burials offer us a unique glimpse into the world of the Scythians. We learn about their rituals and their belief in life after death. We see how they prepared for eternity, how they tried to take their most precious possessions with them to the next world. This speaks to a deep connection with their ancestors, a desire to preserve their status and position even after death. But not all the Kurgan secrets have been revealed. Many were plundered in ancient times. Others are so damaged by time that restoring their original appearance is virtually impossible. And yet, even the finds we do have allow us to lift the veil of secrecy. We see that the Scythians were more than just wild nomads, as they were sometimes portrayed. They were a people with a rich culture, a complex social structure, sophisticated art, and profound spiritual beliefs. Archaeology is a constant dialogue with the past. It is an attempt to hear the voices of those long silenced. When we look at gold jewelry, weapons, or the remains of ancient settlements, we don't just see objects. We feel the breath of the steppes. We hear the clang of swords. We see the images of warriors, women, and children who lived here thousands of years ago. These ghosts of the past don't frighten us. Rather, they invite us. They invite us to understand who we are, where we come from. They remind us that history is more than just a collection of dates and events. It is the story of people, their passions, their aspirations, their struggle for survival. And the Scythians, with their mystery and their strength, remain one of the most vibrant pages in this great book of history. Each new excavation, each new discovery, is like a new page turned in this ancient book. And as long as the earth holds its secrets, as long as the wind whispers its stories over the burial mounds, the work of historians and archaeologists will continue. They will search, they will find, they will tell stories. They will tell stories of the Scythians, of their lives, of their disappearance, of the legacy they left us. Sometimes, standing atop an ancient burial mound, you can feel time slowing down. The wind seems to die down, and the steppe around you becomes silent. In such moments, it seems you can hear the echo of the past, sense the presence of those who once inhabited these lands. This isn't mysticism, but a profound understanding that the past is always close by. It's in the earth, it's in the air, it's within us. The ghosts of the past, materialized in gold, bronze, and stone, invite us on a journey in the footsteps of the Scythians, along their nomadic trails, across their battlefields, and through their places of worship. This is a journey that enriches, that provokes reflection, that helps us understand not only the history of a people, but also the very nature of human destiny, which, like the steppe wind, is fickle yet indomitable. Thus, step by step, layer by layer, archaeologists assemble the mosaic of the Scythian civilization. They reconstruct scenes of their lives, their daily routine, their wars, and their peaceful days. They restore to us the image of a people who left an indelible mark on history. And although the Scythians disappeared as an independent people, their spirit, their culture, their memory live on. They live in burial mounds, they live in artifacts, and they live in our quest to learn and understand. It is in these quiet, silent burial mounds beneath the earth's cover that the keys to understanding an entire era are hidden. Every object recovered from them is a word from a forgotten language. Every layer of soil a line from a lost poem. Archaeologists, like ancient scribes, decipher these messages, giving them new life in our consciousness. They carefully retrieve from oblivion gold jewelry that once adorned Scythian kings and queens, weapons that brought death to enemies, and household items that tell us about everyday life. Imagine the glimmer of gold forged by the skillful hands of ancient craftsmen reaching us across millennia. It's not just metal, it's the embodiment of power, wealth, and a unique Scythian worldview, where beauty and strength were inseparable. These pieces, whether elegant earrings, massive bracelets, or horse harness parts, bear the stamp of timeless genius. They tell us that even in the harsh life of nomads, there was room for art and aesthetics. But artifacts are only part of the story. The burial complexes themselves are also important. The Scythians buried their leaders with special honor, believing they would continue their reign in the afterlife. Enormous burial mounds, such as the Pazyryk burial mounds or the Tolstaya Mogila burial mound, became veritable time capsules. Archaeologists have discovered not only treasures within them, but also objects remarkably preserved thanks to the permafrost. Mummified bodies, wool and silk clothing, wooden furniture, even food remains. All of this allows us to reconstruct the lifestyle, customs, and beliefs of the Scythians with unprecedented accuracy. When researchers descend into these ancient tombs, they feel transported to another reality. The cold, the silence, the sense of millennia past, all create a unique atmosphere that makes one feel like a witness to events long past. They see how a Scythian warrior was dressed, what his tattoos looked like, what kind of sword he wielded. These aren't just dry facts from a textbook. They're a living, breathing experience of history that makes the heart beat faster. Scythian art, particularly their animal style, plays a key role in understanding their worldview. Depictions of animals, deer, panthers, eagles, griffins, carry profound symbolic meaning. They represent strength, speed, freedom, and a connection with nature and the spiritual world. These images, embodied in gold, bronze, and wood, adorned weapons, clothing, and household items, becoming an integral part of Scythian identity. When we see these figures, we can imagine a world where humans felt part of the great outdoors, where animals were not just prey, but totemic ancestors and companions. Furthermore, archaeological finds shed light on the Scythian military art. Arrowheads, swords, battle axes, and remnants of chainmail all testify to a high level of military training and combat equipment. Particularly interesting are the depictions of Scythians in battle preserved on some artifacts. They depict them as skilled and fearless warriors, capable of confronting even the most powerful armies of the time, as, for example, in the famous campaign of Darius I. Finds related to Scythian beliefs also play an important role. Figurines of gods, amulets, and ritual objects all help us understand how they conceived of the world, how they communicated with deities, and how they prepared for the afterlife. Shamanic attributes found in some burials indicate the existence of a developed priesthood and rituals associated with communication with spirits. However, despite all the efforts of archaeologists, many secrets of the Scythian burial mounds remain unsolved. Time and looting have taken their toll, leaving only fragments of the past. But even these fragments are priceless, as they allow us to come closer to understanding this enigmatic and powerful people who left such a lasting mark on history. Every time archaeologists unearth another artifact, it's like a living voice from the past telling its story. It's a story of life, death, struggle, faith, and art. A story that, like the steppe wind, continues to resound through the centuries, reminding us of the grandeur and fragility of human civilization. And as long as the burial mounds stand, as long as the earth preserves its secrets, the work of uncovering them will continue, revealing ever new pages of this astonishing history. Silence. It comes after the storm, after the clash of weapons and shouts, after the rumble of thousands of hooves. A silence that envelops the steppe like a light mist at dawn. In this silence, like a dying echo, echoes of greatness resound. What remains of those who once ruled these boundless expanses? Of the Scythians, whose golden jewelry and military prowess still stir the imagination? Centuries passed. Time, like an inexorable wind, razed cities and settlements to the ground, turning wooden structures and adobe walls to dust. But not all was lost. Deep within the burial mounds, in the earth that preserves the memory of days gone by, lie their secrets. Archaeologists, like patient explorers, are unraveling this tangle of the past, piece by piece. They are discovering gold plaques that once adorned clothing and weapons, revealing the skill of ancient jewelers and the symbols that were important to this people. Animal-shaped jewelry, deer, panthers, eagles, is more than just decoration. It embodies the spirit of the steppes, their strength, their swiftness, their connection with nature. The animal style, as scholars call it, has become the hallmark of Scythian culture, its recognizable signature, unmistakable. The burial mounds remain. These colossal hills, scattered across the steppe like the footprints of giants. Each mound is an entire world buried beneath layers of earth. They contain the remains of kings and nobles, leaders and warriors, their horses and servants, their treasures and weapons. Not only gold, but also bronze, iron, wood, leather. Everything valuable in life accompanied them into eternity. These burials, like time capsules, allow us to peer into the past, to see how the Scythians lived, how they believed, and how they died. They provide insight into the social structure, the military hierarchy, and the wealth possessed by the ruling elite. The great royal burial mounds, such as Soloka or Kul Oba, have become veritable treasure troves for science, revealing to the world an entire layer of a forgotten civilization. But it's not only material evidence that has reached us. There's another legacy, more elusive but no less important. These are legends, passed down orally, transforming and changing over time. These are echoes of their beliefs, their understanding of the universe, of gods dwelling in the heavens and in the depths of the earth, of spirits that control the destinies of people and nature, of shamans who could communicate with the other world, heal, and predict the future. These beliefs, although they left us no monumental temples, permeated the entire life of the Scythians, shaping their actions and worldview. Their history is one of constant movement. They were nomads. Their home was the steppes, their life a journey, a path traced by the hooves of their horses, guided by the wind. They did not build cities, nor did they sit on the ground tied to one place. Their strength lay in their mobility, in their ability to appear and disappear quickly, in swift raids and retreats. These are echoes of their beliefs, their understanding of the universe, of gods dwelling in the heavens and in the depths of the earth, of spirits that control the destinies of people and nature, of shamans who could communicate with the other world, heal, and predict the future. These beliefs, although they left us no monumental temples, permeated the entire life of the Scythians, shaping their actions and worldview. Their history is one of constant movement. They were nomads. Their home was the steppes, their life a journey, a path traced by the hooves of their horses, guided by the wind. They did not build cities, nor did they sit on the ground, tied to one place. Their strength lay in their mobility, in their ability to appear and disappear quickly, in swift raids and retreats.
This mobility, this freedom of movement, was perhaps the key to their long reign.
They were the masters of the steppes, their riders, their soul. Encounters with other peoples, especially the mighty Persian Empire, revealed their incredible audacity and martial prowess. Their refusal to submit, their ability to exploit the terrain, and their agility in battle all became legendary. They were unafraid of great armies. They knew how to counter them, how to strike back, and how to avoid decisive confrontation. This ability to survive and even prevail despite overwhelming odds speaks to the supreme level of their military organization and individual training. Their art, the animal style, became a language understood by many peoples. It spread along the Silk Road, influencing the cultures of neighboring and even distant lands. From the Altai to the Black Sea region, from the Scythians and their neighbors to more distant cultures, this style left an indelible mark. This speaks not only to its artistic value, but also to the extensive trade and cultural ties the Scythians maintained. They were not just warriors, but also active participants in the global processes of their time. But time is inexorable. Even great empires decline. Internal strife, power struggles, weakening military discipline, all this eroded their power from within. And from the north, from the wild steppes, new forces advanced. The Sarmatians, tribes related to the Scythians, began their onslaught. This was not just a change of rulers. It was a change of eras. The Scythians, once formidable conquerors, gradually gave way to new masters of the steppes. Their domains fragmented, their influence waning. The last centers of Scythian culture, especially in Crimea, survived longer, but they too could not withstand the onslaught. Assimilation, migration, absorption by more powerful neighbors. Such was the fate of many once mighty peoples. The great Scythian kingdom, spread over vast territories, gradually disappeared from the political map of the world. But is this the end of the story? No. The history of the Scythians did not end with their political disappearance. It continued in the earth, in burial mounds, in the artifacts we find. It continued in legends, in tales, in the memories of the peoples who lived alongside them. It continued in science, in archaeology, which continues to reveal their secrets, like the wind rustling the grass, telling ancient stories. What remains of this great people? Memory remains. Memory of the steppes, of freedom, of horses, of gold. Memory of military valor and art that still amazes today. Memory of a people who lived by their own laws, who left their unique mark on human history. Their legacy is not just artifacts in museums. It is part of our shared past, which helps us understand ourselves. It is an echo of the steppes that continues to resound, reminding us of the strength, beauty, and fragility of civilization. And as long as we search, as long as we study, as long as we remember, the Scythians live on. They live in every gold object discovered, in every new find, in every story we hear. Their spirit, their culture, their history, all this has become part of what we call our common human heritage. And this heritage, like the steppe wind, will live forever, blowing away the dust of centuries and reminding us of those who came before us. Silence, so profound that you can hear the wind barely touching the grass. The silence that comes before the world turns upside down. Time, as if tired of its endless march, has slowed, almost stopped. The air is still, filled with anticipation, as before a storm, when the sky darkens and the birds fall silent. This is not just a pause, but a breath of eternity, a premonition of changes that will inevitably come. And in this silence, as if from the very depths of the earth, lessons arise. Lessons left behind by the Scythians. These ancient nomads, are like a mirror reflecting all the complexity and contradictions of human destiny. Look at them. Imagine endless steppes where the horizon disappears into the haze, where the sun paints golden patterns on the feather grass. This is their world, a world where movement is life, where a horse is an extension of the soul, and freedom is the air you breathe. They didn't build stone cities, nor erect majestic temples like those erected by sedentary peoples. Their homes were mobile, their lives a constant transition, and therein lies their strength. A strength that stems from a deep connection with nature, with the rhythms of earth and sky. The Scythians were masters of adaptation. They took the best the world had to offer and transformed it into something uniquely their own. Their art, the famous animal style, is more than just decoration. It embodies their worldview, their relationship to the animal world, to the forces of nature. A galloping deer seems to embody speed and freedom. The griffin, combining the strength of a predator with the power of a bird, is a symbol of their warrior spirit. These images, engraved on gold or carved on wood, come to life in our hands, transporting us to that distant era. Their beliefs were as simple as they were profound. They worshipped the sky, that boundless dome above, and the earth, the nurse, the giver of life. Their gods were part of nature, powerful and unpredictable. Fire, water, wind, all carried a divine element. And shamans, intermediaries between worlds, guided them through the mysteries of rituals, healing, predicting the future, and communicating with spirits. Their connection with the otherworldly was organic, natural, like breathing. But the Scythians were more than just peaceful shepherds and skilled artisans. They were warriors. Warriors whose valor and audacity inspired fear even in mighty empires. Recall their encounter with the Persian king Darius. The great conqueror, who had conquered half the world, faced a people who refused to submit. They did not engage in a decisive battle that could have decided the war. Instead, they used their greatest strength, the steppe. They led away their herds, exhausted the enemy, struck with lightning speed, and vanished, leaving the Persians bewildered and furious. It was a war to the death, but a war where intelligence and cunning trumped brute force. Their royal burial mounds are monuments to their greatness, their striving for eternity. These grandiose structures, buried under thousands of tons of earth, contain the remains of rulers, their treasures, their weapons, their faithful horses. Each burial mound tells a story, a life, ended but not forgotten. They bear witness to the wealth, the power, and the complex social structure of Scythian society. These mounds, like silent sentinels, guard the secrets of the past, waiting to be revealed. Their interactions with their neighbors, especially the Greeks, were multifaceted. Trade, exchange of goods, cultural borrowings, all of it existed. The Greeks admired Scythian gold, their art, their warrior spirit. But there were also clashes and conflicts. Borders were always fluid, and relationships as fickle as the steppe wind. The Scythians were part of a larger world, yet they retained their distinctiveness, their uniqueness. But even the greatest civilizations are not eternal. Internal strife, weakening power, and external threats gradually eroded Scythian unity. New forces and new peoples arose to take their place, and one of the most significant was the advance of the Sarmatians. The Sarmatians, tribes related to the Scythians, gradually displaced them from their traditional lands and took their place on the stage of history. This was not simply a change of rulers, it was a change of eras, a shift in cultural paradigms. And then, when it seems that everything has disappeared, that a people has vanished into the ages, a revelation comes. A revelation that comes through archaeology, through discovered artifacts, through deciphered scriptures. Each new burial mound, each new discovery is a voice from the past speaking to us. They remind us that history is not a linear process, but rather a complex pattern where the threads of fate intertwine, where the past lives on in the present. The Scythians, having disappeared as a political force, left an indelible mark. Their legacy is more than just beautiful gold objects in museum display cases. It is a symbol of freedom, a symbol of independence, a symbol of man's profound connection with nature. These are lessons in survival, lessons in adaptation, lessons in how to preserve one's identity in a changing world. They show us that even the most powerful people may face decline, but their spirit and their culture can live on forever. Their fate is a mirror in which we can see ourselves reflected, our aspirations, our fears, our hopes. They remind us of the fragility of civilization, of the eternal cycle of rise and fall, of how each era gives way to a new one. But they also remind us of the strength of the human spirit, of the ability to create beauty, of the timeless desire for freedom. Silence once again envelops the steppe. But this time, it's a different silence, a silence filled with meaning, a silence that carries echoes of the past. Like the wind sweeping across the fields, the Scythians left behind only a whisper, mere echoes that we can hear if we pay attention. And in these whispers lie lessons of eternity that are still relevant today. They teach us to value freedom, respect nature, and strive for excellence in our work. They remind us that every culture, every people who have left their mark is worthy of memory and respect. And as long as we remember, as long as we study, as long as we speak of them, the Scythians live on. They live in our memories, in our hearts, in the very air we breathe. The steppe breathes. The wind that once carried the thunder of hooves and the clash of weapons now only whispers through the tall grass. It tells stories that only the heart can hear. The story of a great people whose horses trod the lands from the Danube to the Indus has reached its natural conclusion. It was not a sudden end, but rather a slow fade, like daylight giving way to evening twilight. The Scythians, masters of gold and rulers of the steppes, vanished into the tide of time. Their royal burial mounds, erected in honor of departed rulers, now preserve only the silence and dust of centuries. The Sarmatians, their fellow nomads, came from the east, bringing with them new customs and a new strength. The great steppe, always generous, welcomed the Scythians, the Sarmatians, and countless other peoples whose names have faded from memory, but whose blood and spirit remain in the soil. Gone are the fearsome horsemen whose arrows sowed fear. Gone are the golden stags that raced across shields. But there is memory, memory carried by archaeologists digging up fragments of their lives from beneath the earth, memory preserved by the earth itself, saturated with their breath. The silence that envelops the steppe is not empty. It is filled with echoes of the past. It is the calm after a storm, when the sky clears and the world finds a new harmony. The wind sweeping over the endless expanses seems to carry with it the last breath of the ancient world. The whisper of the Scythians, ghosts of the past, resounds in its breath. It is an echo of freedom, an echo of strength, an echo of a life that was as bright as lightning and as deep as the earth itself. And now, as the sun sinks toward the horizon, painting the sky in crimson and gold hues, it seems as if the steppe itself is still, inhaling this eternal peace. Traces of the Scythians have vanished from the surface, but their spirit remains. It lives in every gust of wind, in every blade of grass that reaches toward the sky. This is eternity, in which the destinies of peoples are intertwined, in which the past forever remains part of the present. The calm of the steppe wind, that is what remains. This is the last word spoken by the ancient world, a word filled with wisdom and peace.